Black smoke coiled upward into the copper-colored sky, curling like a wounded snake above the ruins of what had once been the Blake homestead. Rowan Blake stood frozen in the dirt yard, her boots planted as if the ground itself were holding her in place. Her calico dress hung in tatters, darkened with ash and soot. She watched as the last beams of her father's barn gave way, collapsing inward with a shower of sparks. The sharp, bitter stench of burning wood and hay clawed at her lungs. She hardly registered it. Her thoughts were miles away, on the dusty road to Tucson, where Grady Blake and her brother Beck had ridden 3 days earlier to sell cattle. They had left her behind to mind the ranch, trusting the land, trusting the quiet. The attack came at first light. An Apache war party swept in with the sunrise, fast, brutal, unstoppable. Rowan had jolted awake to the thunder of hooves and the echo of war cries that turned her blood to ice. She had snatched up her mother Inez Blake's old rifle, hands shaking as she ran outside. But there were too many, nearly 20 warriors, their faces painted for battle, eyes hard beneath the rising sun. They burned the barn first, then the storage shed. They worked with cold precision, torching everything her family had built over 5 relentless years on Arizona soil. As the sun climbed higher, washing the desert in gold and rust, Rowan felt it, the unmistakable weight of being watched. One Apache warrior sat astride a paint-spotted pony less than 30 feet away. His gaze was fixed on her, steady and intent, yet strangely absent of the savagery the newspapers loved to describe. He looked younger than she had expected a chief to be, around 30, maybe less, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. He dismounted in a single, smooth motion. Rowan's hand twitched toward the rifle she'd dropped hours earlier, but he didn't reach for a weapon. He approached her with the controlled ease of a mountain cat. When he stopped, close enough for her to see the fine beadwork stitched into his war shirt, he spoke, in clear, accented Spanish. "You will come with me tonight." The words hung between them, heavy as a dare. Rowan understood Spanish well enough. Her mother had been from Sonora, but hearing it from Apache lips unsettled her. She should have screamed. She should have run. Instead, she stood there, meeting his dark stare, noticing the sharp lines of his face, the way his black hair fell loose past his shoulders, the quiet authority in his posture. "I saw you," he continued when she said nothing. "When we came, you did not flee. You stood with your rifle, ready to die for this place. But when the fire reached the house, you ran inside. Not for money, not for valuables." His eyes never left hers. "You saved books. Why?" Her throat felt as dry as desert sand. "They were my mother's," Rowan said hoarsely. "Poetry, from Mexico." Something shifted in his expression, a brief flicker of recognition. "And when Carnes struck you down," he went on, "when he raised his club, you spoke. Do you remember what you said?" She did. In that moment, with death bearing down on her, the word had slipped from her lips without thought. A word taught by an old Apache woman who sometimes traded near the settlement. "Shima," Rowan whispered. "Mother." Yes, his voice softened, though his authority did not. "You called for your mother in our language. Karn's own mother died last winter. He could not strike you after that." The man circled her slowly, like someone judging a horse, yet his gaze held more curiosity than claim. "My people call me Tavok," he said. "I lead what remains of my band. Disease and bullets have taken many. We need women who are strong, women who can endure what lies ahead." "You're taking me captive," Rowan said flatly. "I am asking you to come," Tavok corrected. The difference mattered to him. "Your ranch is gone. When your men return, they will find only ashes. They will think you dead." He paused. Perhaps that is better. Anger flared in her chest. Better to be a slave to those who burned my home? His jaw tightened. Not a slave. Never. His voice was iron. If you choose me, only if you choose, if you refuse tonight or any night, I will not force you. This is my word, and my word does not bend. Rowan studied him. This Apache warrior who spoke of choice, while her world lay in ruins behind her. She thought of the lonely years on this land, the endless labor, the marriage her father had been arranging with Merrick Crow, the banker's son from Tucson. Soft hands, cruel eyes, already looking at her like property purchased in advance. Why me? She asked. Because you are different, Tavok said. Because you saved books instead of gold. Because you spoke our language when death stood before you. He hesitated, searching for the right words. Because I am done with taking, Tavok said quietly. I want something chosen, something given, not stolen. Several warriors stood back at a distance now, watching their leader. Some wore looks of open curiosity. Others showed thinly veiled doubt. Rowan knew, with sudden clarity, that she stood at a divide far greater than land or blood. She was choosing between two versions of herself. The obedient daughter who would remain here, waiting for Grady Blake's return, who would marry Merrick Crow and raise children behind lace curtains, or something else entirely. And if I go with you, Rowan asked slowly, what happens then? Then you learn our ways, Tavok answered. You work beside our women. You eat what we eat. You sleep where we sleep. His voice never wavered. If soldiers come, you run with us. If hunger comes, you endure it with us. But you will be treated with respect. He stepped closer, his tone firm. Anyone who dishonors you dishonors me, and if you choose to leave, you leave, but not tonight. Tonight, he continued, gesturing toward the endless desert stretching beyond the ruins. You decide only whether you come. The rest, we discover as we walk. Rowan turned back toward what remained of her home. Charred beams, fallen walls, and in the dust, her mother's books rescued from the flames. The only things she had deemed worth risking her life for. Inez Blake, the woman society whispered about for marrying an American rancher, the woman who read poetry by lamplight and carried Mexico in her voice. Gone 3 winters now, taken while bringing another child into the world. What would you have done, Rowan asked, if I'd refused outright? Tavok nearly smiled. I would have ridden away, found another way to save my people. His gaze held hers. But I hoped. Hoped what? That a woman who saved poetry from fire might understand a people trying to keep their songs from silence. The wind shifted, carrying sage and dust. Rowan felt something shift inside her as well. She thought of the proper women in proper houses, whispering judgments about her mother. Thought of Merrick Crow's possessive stare. A life of social calls and stiff smiles, her spirit slowly crushed beneath polite expectations. She looked down at her hands, strong, scarred, capable, now trembling with the weight of the moment. When she raised her eyes again, she no longer saw a savage warrior. She saw a man offering what her world never had. Choice. I'll need to gather a few things, Rowan said softly. Tavok nodded once, solemn, as if an oath had been sealed. Be quick. We ride before the sun reaches its height. As Rowan moved through the wreckage of her past, she heard Tavok speaking to his warriors in Apache. She couldn't understand the words, but she caught what sounded like her name, or the name she was being given. A name tied to books, to memory, to keeping words alive. She packed with care. Her mother's books, clean clothes, her grandmother's sewing kit, a small pouch of healing herbs, practical items for an impractical decision. When she returned, Tavok had brought forward a spare pony, smaller than his warhorse, but steady and alert. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Better than most men," Rowan replied truthfully. This time he smiled. Brief, genuine. "Good. We have a long road ahead." As she mounted, Rowan caught her reflection in a shard of broken mirror. Hair wild, face streaked with smoke, eyes bright with something close to madness or freedom. She barely recognized herself. The war party moved out. Tavok guided his horse alongside hers. "You're afraid," he said. "Yes," Rowan answered, "but I'm going anyway." "My mother used to say courage isn't the absence of fear," she continued. "It's acting despite it." "She was wise," Tavok said. "She came from Sonora. She knew what it meant to live between worlds." They rode in silence before he spoke again. "You haven't asked what I expect of you." Rowan kept her gaze on the horizon. "You said you wanted something freely given. That tells me all I need to know." Behind them, the smoke from the Blake Ranch thinned until it became nothing more than a dark smudge on the sky. Rowan did not look back. She had chosen, in the space between his words and her answer. Whatever lay ahead, hardship, danger, even regret, she would meet it awake and unafraid. Rowan Blake rode toward a life unknown, leaving everything behind. Yet for the first time since her mother's death, she felt wholly alive. The Apache would come to call her the keeper of words. She would need every one of them. The camp lay hidden deep within a narrow canyon, its entrance so cleverly concealed that Rowan would have passed it without notice, if Tavok had not guided her between two towering walls of stone. As they passed through the narrow stone passage and stepped into the canyon beyond, Rowan caught her breath. Roughly 40 people moved through the camp, mostly women and children, tending small cooking fires, repairing brush shelters, going about the quiet labor of survival. It was far fewer than she had imagined, and the truth of Tavok's words struck her hard. His band was no longer a people at full strength. Their arrival rippled through the camp at once. Women paused mid-grind at the cornstones. Children froze where they stood. The few men present reached instinctively for weapons, until recognition settled in, and they lowered their hands. But it was the looks turned on Rowan that made her stomach tighten. Surprise, distrust, and from some, open resentment. From the largest shelter stepped an older woman, her face lined by wind and years, silver threaded through dark hair that still held its strength. She carried herself with unquestioned authority. Rowan knew at once this was Ona, Tavok's mother. The woman's eyes, dark, sharp, and unyielding, locked onto Rowan with a force that made her want to shrink back in the saddle. The rapid exchange that followed in Apache needed no translation. Ona's voice cut sharp and accusatory. Tavok answered calmly, firmly. Other women gathered, their voices rising in clear protest. Rowan caught a word among them. Her name, or rather the name being spoken about her, said with doubt and unease. At last Tavok raised his hand. Silence fell. He spoke at length, his voice carrying the weight of command. Rowan couldn't understand the words, but she heard certainty in them. When he finished, Tavok turned to her and addressed her in Spanish, loud enough for all to hear. "Tell them why you came." Rowan slid from the pony, every eye fixed on her. Her legs shook from the long ride, but she straightened her spine and stood tall. She spoke in Spanish, knowing enough would understand. "I chose to come," she said. "No one forced me. No one dragged me. I chose." She hesitated, searching for words strong enough to cross the divide between them. My mother was from Sonora. She taught me there are many ways to be strong, many ways to live. When your son asked me to come, I could have refused. I came because I was already a prisoner in my own world. Here, at least, I was given a choice. The silence that followed stretched thin and heavy. Then Ona stepped forward. "I am Ona," she said in rough English. "You say you chose. We will see if you still choose when you understand what choice costs here." She snapped her fingers. Two younger women approached. "You will work. You will learn," Ona continued. "You will earn your place, or you will leave. My son may lead this band, but the women decide who belongs. Do you understand?" "I understand," Rowan answered. "Good. Then you begin now." She gestured again. "Mira and Zek will show you where you sleep, where you work. You know nothing. You will do as they say. Perhaps in time, you will know something. Perhaps not." Mira, round-faced, close to Rowan's age, and Zek, older, with a long scar cutting across her left cheek, led Rowan to a small shelter at the edge of camp. It was barely large enough for two people, built from bent saplings layered with hides and brush. Inside lay a thin, worn blanket and baskets of dried plants Rowan couldn't name. "You sleep here," Zek said in broken English. "Work before sun. You miss work. You don't eat." They showed her the water source, the wood piles, the place for waste. Rowan began to see how fragile everything was. The camp was built to vanish, ready at any moment to be abandoned and swallowed by the land. That first night, Tavok did not come to her. Rowan lay awake on the thin blanket, staring through gaps in the shelter at unfamiliar stars, wondering if she had misunderstood him. The camp slowly quieted, but sleep would not come. She listened to night birds calling, coyotes yipping in the distance, the steady breathing of someone in the shelter nearby. At last, a shadow appeared at her doorway, outlined by dying embers from the fires. Her heart lurched, but Tavok only sat at the entrance, not crossing the threshold. "You did well today," he said quietly. "My mother is hard, but she is fair." "She doesn't want me here," Rowan said. "No, but she respects courage," Tavok replied. "Show her yours, and she may change." They sat in silence before he spoke again. "I had a wife once, Yali. She died 3 winters ago. Our son died with her. Sickness from the reservation." The words carried old pain, scarred but never healed. "I swore I would never take another wife," Tavok said at last. "But each season our band grows smaller. We need children, or we vanish completely." Rowan drew her knees up against her chest. "So that's why you brought me here? To bear children?" He stayed silent long enough that she thought he would let the question die in the dark. "I brought you," Tavok finally said, "because when I saw you run into fire to save books, I knew you understood something most people never do, that some things matter more than life itself." He shifted slightly, his voice low and steady. "My people's stories, our songs, our ways, they matter more than any single life. But they need new voices to carry them forward. If there are no children, those voices disappear with us." "I don't know your stories," Rowan said quietly. "You will," he answered, "if you choose to stay." In the darkness before dawn, they spoke. Tavok told her of his childhood, of racing horses across open plains before soldiers came in endless numbers, of his first raid at 14, the fear tangled with pride, of meeting Yali at a trading gathering, how she had laughed when he tried too hard to impress her, of watching his father fall to soldiers' bullets, of becoming leader too young, with too little wisdom, holding together what remained of his people. In return, Rowan told him of Inez Blake's stories of Sonora, of learning to read by lamplight from poetry books, of Grady Blake's quiet disappointment that she wasn't a son, of Beck Blake's casual dismissal of her thoughts and dreams, of the long loneliness of the ranch, the sameness of days, and the slow realization that her life was being shaped into something she never wanted. As the eastern sky began to pale, Tavok asked, "Your mother's books, what did they say that mattered so much?" Rowan thought of poetry filled with love and loss, of words that spoke of choosing one's path even when it led through sorrow. They said that living without passion isn't living at all. Tavok nodded. "Then your mother's people and mine understand each other. We say it is better to die standing than to live on your knees." As the camp began to wake, he rose to leave. "The women will work you hard. Some will be cruel. Do not answer cruelty with anger. Show strength through endurance." Then, for the first time, he used her white name. "Rowan, remember that you chose this. When it becomes difficult, remember why." The days that followed blurred into exhaustion and learning. Rowan's hands, already rough from ranch work, blistered anew from grinding corn on stone, scraping hides, gathering thorned plants for food and medicine. Mira proved patient, teaching her which roots nourished, which healed, which killed. Zek remained sharp and suspicious, quick with criticism. Yet Rowan sensed grief beneath her hardness. 2 daughters lost to soldiers' bullets. The children were the first to accept her. Curious about her pale skin and light hair, they hovered nearby as she worked, laughing at her attempts to shape Apache words. She learned their names, Roa, Tylo, Little Ash, and taught them Spanish in return, turning language into a game that drew smiles even from some of the women. Each night, Tavok came to her shelter, always sitting at the entrance, never crossing the line. They continued trading stories, building understanding word by word. Rowan learned he had briefly attended a mission school as a child, explaining his Spanish. He had hated it, but understood the power of knowing the enemy's language. "Is that what I am?" she asked one night. "The enemy?" "You were born among our enemies," Tavok replied. "But who you are, that remains to be seen." By the second week, Rowan found her rhythm, rising before dawn, helping prepare food, working wherever assigned, resting briefly during the worst heat, then labor again until nightfall. Her body hardened. Her skin darkened beneath the desert sun. She began to understand simple Apache phrases, to move with something close to the women's efficiency. It was Ona who finally marked a shift. Rowan struggled with a stubborn hide when the older woman approached. "Wrong," Ona said bluntly, taking the scraping tool from Rowan's bleeding hands. "Use your weight, not just your arms." As she demonstrated, she added quietly, "You do not complain. This is good. Complaining changes nothing." She returned the tool. "My son sees something in you. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps not. Time will decide." That night, Tavok smiled when Rowan told him. "She begins to soften. This is rare." "She has buried a husband and 3 children," he continued. "She leads the women as I lead the band. Without her strength, we would have scattered long ago." "And your strength?" Rowan asked, emboldened by the darkness. "What keeps you here when you could disappear into Mexico and live free?" Tavok answered simply, "This land is our blood. Every mountain knows our names. Every stream carries our stories." "To leave," Tavok said quietly, "is to die in another way." He paused, eyes fixed on the dark outline of the canyon walls. "But perhaps there is another road. One that keeps what matters alive while bending to what cannot be changed." Rowan studied him. "What do you mean?" "You will understand," he replied, "if you remain." The answer did not come right away. Instead, the next morning brought a test Rowan had never expected. A hunting party returned before sunrise with grim news. Soldier patrols had been sighted 2 days' ride to the south, moving steadily north. The camp shifted instantly into controlled urgency. Shelters were stripped down, fires reduced to ash, supplies gathered with practiced speed. Rowan was swept into the motion. She packed food, rolled hides, learned how quickly a home could become a burden that had to be left behind. And as she worked, she realized something subtle but profound had changed. The women no longer watched her with guarded eyes. Zek showed her how to secure medicine bundles so they wouldn't be ruined in flight. Mira trusted her to prepare travel rations. No one questioned her hands anymore. That evening, as the camp waited in tense readiness, Tavok came to her openly for the first time. He sat beside her near the communal fire. "If we must flee," he said, "you will ride with the women and children. Stay close to Mira." Then he placed a knife in her hand. The blade was sharp, perfectly balanced. "This is for protection," he said, "and for choice. Some things are worse than death. Each person must decide for themselves what those things are." Rowan understood what he did not say. She closed her fingers around the knife, its weight unfamiliar, and strangely reassuring. All around them, the camp stood ready, packed with the calm efficiency of people who had fled before and would flee again. But the soldiers never came. Scouts returned with word that the patrol had turned east, following another trail. The tension eased, though nothing was unpacked. The people slept light and ready. That night, for the first time, Tavok entered Rowan's shelter. Not as a demand, not as a claim, just as presence. Before dawn could bring explanation, the new moon ceremony arrived without warning. Rowan woke to a camp transformed. Women painted their faces with red ochre and white clay. Men brought out drums hidden away since the last ceremony. The air felt charged, alive. Mira appeared at Rowan's shelter carrying folded garments, a deerskin dress worked with beads and shells, soft moccasins unlike anything Rowan had ever worn. "Tonight is sacred," Mira said as she helped her dress. "New moon, new beginnings. The spirits decide who belongs." Rowan's hands trembled as Mira braided her hair, weaving in eagle feathers and turquoise beads. "What do I do?" "Watch. Listen," Mira said. "When the moment comes, you will know." As darkness fell, the band gathered in a natural bowl formed by the canyon walls. A great fire burned at the center, sparks climbing toward the stars. The drums began. A deep, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat rising from the ground itself. Tavok sat with the other men, his face painted in symbols Rowan could not read. Across the flames, his eyes found hers. Then Ona stood, her voice lifted in a chant, raw and powerful. Other women joined her. Rowan did not understand the words, but she felt their meaning. Grief and hope, defiance and joy braided together like cord. One by one, people rose to dance. Their movements told stories of hunts and battles, of love and loss, of children born and elders laid to rest. When Zek pulled Rowan to her feet, she hesitated. "I don't know the steps." "There are no steps," Zek said, and for the first time she smiled. "Only truth." Rowan moved with them, awkward at first, then freer. The drums pulsed through her blood, drawing something fierce and alive from her chest. She thought of Inez Blake dancing at Mexican festivals, of Grady Blake's disapproval, calling it improper. But there was nothing improper here. Only life, unpolished, honest, and breathtaking. Time lost meaning. Firelight blurred. The world narrowed to rhythm and motion. When Tavok finally rose and moved toward her through the dancers, Rowan felt as though she had been waiting for this moment all her life. He reached out his hand. She took it. The drums changed rhythm. The dancers formed a circle around them. Tavok spoke in Apache, his voice carrying over the beat. Rowan did not understand the words, but she heard her names, both of them, woven through what was clearly a vow. Then Ona stepped forward with a blanket, finely woven with patterns of mountains and rivers. She spoke, her weathered face solemn, and draped the blanket around their shoulders. The circle erupted in celebration. Rowan stood beside Tavok, wrapped in warmth and sound and firelight, no longer between worlds, but standing fully within one. "What just happened?" Rowan Blake whispered to Tavok, as people pressed forward, hands reaching out to touch them, voices offering blessings she could not understand. "You became my wife," Tavok said simply, "and I became your husband, if you accept." Her heart thundered. "You should have asked," she said, half breathless. "I am asking now," he replied, his voice carrying so all could hear. "Before my people, before the spirits." He held her gaze. "Will you walk this path with me, Rowan Blake, wherever it leads?" She looked around at faces lit by firelight. Smiles, solemn nods, Zek's rare look of approval. Even Ona's stern features had softened, touched by something close to affection. These people, strangers only weeks ago, waited as though her answer mattered. As though she mattered. "Yes," Rowan said, and every part of her meant it. The celebration rolled on until dawn. Eventually, Tavok guided her away from the fire to a shelter she had not seen before. Larger, warmer, lined with thick buffalo robes and carefully placed baskets. Their marriage shelter, prepared quietly, without her knowing. Inside, by the glow of a small oil lamp, Tavok's painted face looked almost unreal. His hands were gentle as he loosened the pins from her hair, letting it fall over her shoulders. "Are you afraid?" he asked, echoing his question from that first day. "No," Rowan said, surprised to find it true. "Not of you, not of this." What followed was unhurried and tender, a shared language of breath and touch, learning and trust. Tavok was attentive to every response. Rowan found herself opening, discovering a warmth she had never known. When they finally lay quiet together, she understood why her mother's poetry spoke so often of desire. It carried its own truth. The weeks that followed were the happiest Rowan had ever known. As Tavok's wife, her place within the band changed. She was given more responsibility and more respect. Ona began teaching her the medicinal uses of plants, knowledge usually passed from mother to daughter. The women included her in their laughter, their quiet rituals, their shared confidences. Tavok taught her to shoot the bow as well as rifles. Patience instead of force. He showed her how to read the land like a map, to find water where none seemed to exist, to move silently through unforgiving terrain. "You learn quickly," he told her one afternoon, as she brought down a rabbit with her third arrow. "Perhaps there is Apache blood in you already." "My mother always said we had Indian blood, long ago," Rowan admitted. "She never said from where." "All blood is mixed if you go back far enough," Tavok said. "What matters is the heart." He touched her chest gently. "And yours is learning." Even in happiness, shadows crept at the edges. Scouts brought troubling news. More soldiers, more settlers. The steady advance of civilization into their desert refuge. Other Apache bands had been forced onto reservations or driven south into Mexico. Their small group could not remain hidden forever. It was one morning, when cottonwoods showed the first gold of autumn, that Rowan understood. She had been tired, her stomach unsettled. When she vomited her morning meal for the third day, Mira gave her a knowing look. "How long since your moon blood?" Mira asked. Rowan counted back, her breath catching. 2 cycles gone. Mira grinned and called for Ona, who arrived with her medicine bundle. After examining Rowan with practiced hands, Ona nodded once. "A child," she said. "Strong. A spring baby, if all goes well." Her dark eyes searched Rowan's face. "This is what you want." "Yes," Rowan breathed, her hand moving to her still flat belly. "Yes." When Tavok learned the news, joy shone through him, but it was edged with worry. He held her close, his hand covering hers over the promise of new life. "I should take you away," he murmured. "Somewhere safer." "There is nowhere safer," Rowan said quietly. "We both know that." After a long silence, he spoke again. "There is a place in the Sierra Madre, across the border. Other bands have gone there. The Mexicans mostly leave them alone." "We could," Rowan said, then shook her head. "Your mother would never leave. Half the band wouldn't. This is your land." "Our land," Tavok corrected. Then his voice hardened. "But what good is land to a dead child?" It was the beginning of a question that would return again and again through the winter months, as Rowan's belly grew round and the band celebrated the promise of new life. Children were rare now, precious as water in drought, and every choice carried weight. The women hovered over Rowan constantly, pressing warm broths into her hands to ease her sickness, stitching tiny garments from the softest hides they could find. Tavok grew almost absurdly protective, stepping in whenever he thought a task too demanding. Rowan, who had never been coddled a day in her life, found it equal parts touching and maddening. "I'm pregnant," she snapped one afternoon, when he tried to stop her from helping butcher an elk. "Not dying. Apache women have worked through pregnancy for generations." "Apache women have not been my wife," Tavok replied, without hesitation. The women burst into laughter, teasing him for going soft. But beneath the humor, danger pressed closer each day. Winter came without snow, bringing soldiers instead. Patrols multiplied. Searches tightened. In 2 months, the band moved camp 3 times, each relocation harder than the last as Rowan's body grew heavier with child. During the 3rd move, she felt it for the first time, a sudden flutter beneath her ribs, like the beating wings of a trapped bird. She gasped, clutching her belly. Tavok was at her side instantly. "Here," she whispered, guiding his hand. "Feel." His breath caught as the movement came again, stronger this time. "A warrior," he murmured. "Already fighting. Or a girl who takes after her grandmother," Rowan said, glancing toward Ona, who pretended not to be watching. That night, inside their shelter, Tavok sang softly to her belly. Old songs, creation stories, melodies his mother had once sung. Rowan drifted to sleep to the sound of his voice, feeling safer than she had any right to feel. She dreamed of a child with dark hair and light eyes, running freely across a land without borders, speaking many tongues, belonging to many worlds. A bridge. When she woke, the thought lingered. Their child could be that bridge, if it lived long enough to become one. Spring arrived early in the desert, carrying fragile hope with it. The soldiers withdrew, drawn away by troubles elsewhere. The band settled near a dependable spring, and for a few precious weeks, life felt almost ordinary. Heavily pregnant now, Rowan had fully woven herself into Apache life. She could identify edible plants at a glance, prepare a hide for tanning, and understand most conversations spoken around her. More importantly, she had found her place among the people. She was teaching the children to mark letters in charcoal on flat stones when the first pain struck. It hit like lightning, stealing her breath. Tilo looked up at her, alarmed. "You sick?" No, Rowan said, forcing a breath. The baby is coming. The boy ran for help. Within moments, women surrounded her. Ona took command with the authority of someone who had delivered countless children. They guided Rowan to the birthing shelter, a place prepared days earlier, and eased her onto soft furs. Now we see your strength, Ona said, her voice firm but kind. Apache babies come when they choose. You must be patient. Patience was the last thing Rowan felt as the pain intensified. She had helped with calving on the ranch, but this was different. This was her body being reshaped from within. Outside, Tavok paced like a trapped mountain cat, barred by custom from entering until the child was born. Dawn came as it always did, rose-gold light spilling across the canyon walls, morning birds calling their claims. Rowan knelt by the grinding stones, working corn into meal for the morning cakes. Her belly was round with 6 months of life. The steady motion calmed her, as did the low murmur of women nearby. She had learned to cherish moments like this, the cool morning air, children's laughter, the scent of piñon smoke. The first gunshot shattered it all. For a heartbeat, the camp froze. Then chaos erupted. Women grabbed children. Men reached for weapons. The canyon filled with the thunder of cavalry horses crashing into their hidden refuge. Rowan's mind reeled. How had they been found? The scouts, the secret paths, all useless now against the blue-coated flood pouring in. Run! Ona's voice cut through the panic. The older woman seized Rowan's arm with fierce strength. The caves protect the child! But there was nowhere to run. Soldiers surged from every direction, Spencer rifles cracking like rolling thunder. Rowan saw Zek fall, red blooming across her chest. Saw little Ash shaking his mother, trying to wake her. Death painted the morning in images that would never leave her. A rifle butt slammed into Rowan's shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Pain tore through her as she curled instinctively around her belly, shielding the life inside. Through dust and gun smoke, her eyes searched wildly, searching for Tavok. Rowan caught flashes of Tavok in motion, his body moving with lethal grace, rifle flashing fire, each shot dropping a soldier who came too close. Then their eyes locked across the chaos. Time slowed. She saw the decision form on his face, the impossible choice between standing his ground and reaching her. He wheeled his horse and drove straight toward her. She saw the soldiers notice, saw rifles lift, tracking his charge. No! The cry ripped from her throat as she tried to push herself upright. Tavok! He nearly made it. His horse cleared fallen bodies and shattered cooking fires, hooves striking sparks from stone. 20 feet, then 10. Close enough for Rowan to see everything written in his eyes. Love and desperation, bound together. The gunfire came in a single, endless roar. Rowan watched, frozen in horror, as bullets struck. 1, then 5, then more. Tavok's body jolted with each impact, yet he stayed upright, still reaching for her, until his horse screamed. It collapsed beneath him, throwing Tavok hard into the dust. No, no, no! Rowan crawled toward him, deaf to the battle raging around her. Hands seized her arms, dragging her back. She fought like a cornered animal, screaming his name, but the world had begun to gray at the edges, darkness closing in. The last thing she saw was Tavok trying to rise, blood pooling beneath him, still reaching for her as soldiers closed in. 23 shots. She would learn later it took 23 bullets to stop him. Then everything went dark. She woke in hell, or what the army called a field hospital. Canvas walls, the sharp stench of blood and carbolic acid, the moans of wounded soldiers mixing with the terrible silence where her people should have been. An army doctor with gentle eyes and blood-soaked hands bent over her, speaking words that slid past her mind without meaning. "You're safe now, miss," he said softly. "The savages can't hurt you anymore." He hesitated, then added, "I'm afraid the child. The shock was too much. I'm sorry." "The child." Her hands flew to her belly, still swollen, but wrong. Empty. The sound that tore from her throat was not human. The doctor stepped back, calling for laudanum, but no medicine could touch this pain. "Where is he?" Rowan grabbed the doctor's coat, fingers digging in. "Tavok, the chief. Where is he?" "The Apache leader is dead," the doctor replied. "Killed while attacking our position." The lie came easily. "You're safe now. Your father is on his way from Tucson. You'll be home soon." Home. The word meant nothing. Home had been Tavok's arms. Home had been Apache songs drifting through the night. Home had been the child who would never draw breath. The bridge that would never be built. They kept her sedated for days. Maybe weeks. Time lost all shape. She surfaced now and then to find Grady Blake's face above her. Lined, worried, speaking of strength and survival and forgetting, as if forgetting were possible. As if she wanted to. The journey to Tucson passed in fragments, being lifted into a wagon, her father's awkward attempts at comfort, soldiers refusing to meet her eyes. She heard their whispers. "Found with the savages. Poor thing. Months of captivity. Lucky to be alive." They had already written her story, casting her as a victim rescued by civilization. She tried once to correct them. "I wasn't a captive," Rowan said weakly. "I was his wife. I chose—" Her father's hand covered her mouth. Gentle, firm. "Hush, Rowan. You're not thinking clearly. The doctor says it's the trauma. Just rest. We'll be home soon." Home was a house in Tucson that felt like a tomb. Her father had prospered in her absence. The ranch sold. A new business established. She was placed in a room with lace curtains and a soft bed that felt like drowning. Neighbor women came to call, eyes bright with horrified curiosity. They spoke in hushed tones about her ordeal. Rowan learned quickly that the truth was unwelcome. When she spoke of choosing Tavok, of loving him, of carrying his child, faces closed like slammed doors. The doctor was summoned. More laudanum prescribed. "Poor thing," they whispered. "The savages broke her mind." So she learned to lie. She nodded when they spoke of captivity, let tears fall when they praised her strength for surviving. She played the part of the rescued woman, damaged, grateful, silent. All the while, she carried her secret. The second child. The one they did not know about. Tavok's final gift. Her quiet rebellion against the story they had written for her. The banker's son, Merrick Crow, still intended to marry her. This was presented as an act of generosity, his willingness to overlook her unfortunate experience. Rowan Blake endured the chaperoned visits in silence, watching the soft-spoken man outline his plans for their future, while she counted the weeks of her hidden pregnancy and quietly made plans of her own. "You're very quiet," Merrick would say, mistaking her restraint for ladylike modesty rather than the uprising screaming inside her. "But that's proper," he added once, pleased with himself. "After all you've been through." Trials. As if love could be reduced to a hardship. As if choosing her own life were something to survive instead of claim. Rowan became skilled at deception. She blamed women's troubles for the slow thickening of her waist, altered her dresses in secret, practiced a growing frailty to avoid social gatherings. She took money from her father's cash box, small amounts spread over time, and hid it with the few treasures she had kept. Her mother's poetry books, a beaded necklace Mira had made for her. A small piece of turquoise tavok had given her the day they learned about the first child. At night, she lay in the soft bed that felt like a lie and whispered to the baby. Apache words, Spanish endearments, English promises. "You will know who you are," she vowed. "You will know your father's name, your people's stories. I swear this on everything sacred." Her father began speaking of wedding dates. Merrick's looks grew bolder, possessive. The walls of her prison pressed closer each day, and still the child grew. Quiet, steady, a hidden flame keeping her alive in a world that demanded her silence. The breaking point came with the first true quickening. The flutter that meant life had taken firm hold. She was in the parlor, enduring another visit when the child moved. Her sharp intake of breath was mistaken for pain. Salts were fetched, cool cloths pressed to her skin. Murmured concern filled the room, and in that moment, Rowan saw her future stretched out before her. A lifetime of lies, of concealment, of betraying everything Tavok had died to protect. That night, she gathered her hidden money, her mother's books, a change of clothes. The knife Tavok had given her, still sharp, went into its concealed sheath. She left a note for her father. Simple. Final. I am not who you need me to be. Do not look for me. The desert welcomed her like a daughter returning home. Rowan had learned well from her Apache family. How to move unseen, how to find water, how to live on the land's harsh mercy. She traveled by night, slept hidden by day, moving south toward the mountains that had always meant sanctuary. She nearly didn't make it. On the fourth night, exhaustion and pregnancy overtook her. She collapsed beside a small spring, her body finally rebelling against what she demanded of it. That was where Diego Serrano found her, an old shepherd who asked no questions about a pregnant white woman alone in the wilderness. He carried her to his small cabin and called for his wife. Luz Serrano took one look at Rowan and understood everything that mattered. Apache, she said. Not a question, but recognition. The child's father? Yes, Rowan whispered, too tired to lie. Then we help, Luz said simply. My grandmother was Apache, taken young, made Mexican, but the blood remembers. They kept her through the worst of it, false labor that threatened early birth, dehydration that left her weak as a newborn calf. When she was strong enough to travel, they sent her higher into the mountains with supplies and directions to a village where questions were not asked, and pasts could be buried like seeds, waiting for the right season. Rowan arrived as the first snow fell. She had just enough money to rent a small adobe house at the edge of town. When curiosity came calling, she introduced herself as Sarah Delgado, widow of a Mexican rancher killed by bandits. The lie came easily now. She had learned that survival sometimes demanded careful falsehoods. The village women, seasoned in quiet grief, recognized a sister in sorrow. They helped her prepare for birth, sharing remedies and wisdom, never questioning why she sometimes woke screaming a name that did not belong to the husband she had invented. Winter deepened. Her body grew heavy with promise. Evenings were spent by her small fire, reading her mother's poetry aloud, mixing Spanish verses with Apache lullabies, building a new language for a child who would belong to more than one world. Your father once named the stars for me, she whispered. Each one has a story. You'll know them all. I promise, every star, every story, every truth they tried to take from us. The labor pains began during a spring storm. Rain lashed the adobe walls. Thunder rolled across the mountains like war drums. Rowan had sent for Paloma Reyes, the village midwife, but the storm had washed the mountain paths away. She was alone with the fury of the storm, and the greater fury of her own body, demanding to finish what it had begun. She had prepared as best she could. Clean cloths laid out, water boiled, the knife Tavok had given her scrubbed and heated clean between contractions. A bitter laugh tore from her throat. She had survived an army massacre, the loss of her first child, months trapped in her father's house, an escape across the desert while pregnant. And now she might die bringing Tavok's child into the world with nothing but thunder and rain as witness. "Not today," she snarled through clenched teeth, remembering Ona's teachings about birth, the lessons the old woman had insisted she learn, even though such knowledge was usually withheld from first-time mothers. "Pain is the pathway," Ona had said. "Fear is the enemy. Your body remembers the ancient dance." Rowan let instinct take over. She moved as her body demanded, squatting, kneeling, pacing the small adobe room like the mountain cats Tavok once said she resembled. The storm screamed outside, and she screamed back, claiming her strength in the raw, wordless song of birth. When the child finally came, sliding into her waiting hands with blood and water and breath, the storm broke. Silence fell, sudden and holy, broken only by the thin, furious cry of new life. Rowan stared down in disbelief. A son. She saw it instantly, and when she looked into his eyes, she knew. They were Tavok's. Dark, knowing, unafraid. "Jace," she whispered, the name she chose for the outside world. Then, softly, in Apache, "Little warrior." "You are Jace Blake," she murmured, "son of chiefs." Paloma Reyes arrived at dawn, finding Rowan washed, the baby clean and wrapped, the evidence of a solitary birth already hidden away. The midwife examined them both with practiced hands and nodded in approval. "You have the strength of mountain women," Paloma said. "This child will be strong, like his mother." Rowan looked down at her son, nursing with fierce concentration, and made a vow that settled deep into her bones. He would know strength, but more than that, he would know the truth of who he was, no matter what lies the world demanded she tell. The early months tested her more than anything before. Not the physical hardship. She had known hunger and exhaustion among the Apache, but the constant vigilance required to protect their secret while keeping her son alive. She took in washing and mending for money. Her hands cracked from lye soap. Her back burned from hours bent over washboards. When Jace cried from hunger and her milk fell short, she swallowed her pride and begged credit at the general store. The village women helped when they could. They respected her story of widowhood, even as they noticed the deeper truth written in her son's features. "Indigenous blood," they murmured. In these mountains, where Apache and Mexican bloodlines had crossed for generations, it raised no alarm. They taught her which wild plants strengthened milk, which herbs calmed a restless child at night. Rowan became skilled at quiet deception. When Jace's first word was Apache, Amar, water, she quickly taught him agua to mask it. When he moved with a grace she remembered from Tavok, she blamed mountain living. When his eyes tracked things others could not see, she called it imagination, not the sharpened awareness of a people who survived by reading signs. But at night, when no one could hear, she told him the truth. She spoke of his father's courage. She sang Apache songs she had memorized during her time with the band. She taught him to move silently, to read clouds and wind, to know which plants healed and which harmed. Everything Tavok would have taught him, passed on through her imperfect but determined memory. "Your father could call eagles from the sky," she whispered. "He could find water where none existed. He chose to die with honor, rather than live without it." Jace listened with solemn eyes, as if he understood the weight being laid upon him. By the time he was 3, walking steady, speaking a braid of languages, Rowan was no longer just another widow. Her knowledge of healing plants, learned from Ona, had spread through the village. Women came to her when other remedies failed. Even the local curandera admitted Apache medicine reached where hers could not. Rowan was teaching Jace to identify medicinal herbs in their small garden when Estrella Vega, the wealthiest woman in the village, arrived with her grandson. The boy, about Jace's age, had a cough that would not break. Rowan recognized the signs immediately. She had seen it before among the Apache. "Deserti," she said carefully in Spanish, preparing the remedy the old way, with prayer to the 4 directions. Estrella's eyes sharpened. "You know indigenous ways. My husband's grandmother," Rowan answered smoothly. "She taught me before she died." The lie slid easily now, worn smooth by survival. The tea worked. Rowan knew it would. Word spread. Soon she had steady patience, enough income to move to a better house, to buy books for Jace, to build something resembling a life. But when night fell, the ghosts still came. The image that haunted her most was Tavok's face in the instant before the bullet struck. Then the first child she had lost, the one who should have been walking now, talking, laughing, chasing his brother through dust and sunlight. Zek falling, Ash shaking his mother, begging her to wake. The band scattered, broken, their voices erased. "Tell me about Father." Jace Blake would ask it softly, always when he sensed the ache behind her eyes. So Rowan told him. She spoke of courage and choice, of love that crossed borders men insisted could not be crossed, of a people who fought to remain free until the very last breath was taken from them. She taught him to be proud of every part of himself, the Apache strength in his bones, the Mexican resilience in his blood, even the Anglo adaptability that allowed them to survive in a world hostile to their truth. Seasons turned. Jace grew like a desert wildflower, tough, unexpected, beautiful. His mind was quick and restless, drinking in language the way cracked earth drinks rain. By 5, he read in Spanish and English, tracked rabbits through piñon scrub, and mixed simple medicines with steady hands. Rowan began to believe they had found their place, a way to honor the past without being buried by it. Then Merrick Crow walked into the general store. She saw him first. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. Prosperity had softened him, but the possessive hunger in his eyes was unchanged. She tightened her grip on Jace's hand, ready to flee, but it was already too late. His gaze locked onto her. "Rowan Blake," he said loudly for the whole store to hear. "We thought you were dead." Every head turned. In a small village, spectacle was currency. "I think you're mistaken," Rowan said evenly. "My name is Sarah Delgado." "No." He stepped closer. Jace shifted in front of her instinctively, small body squared in defense. "Your father hired detectives. We searched for 2 years." Merrick's eyes dropped to the child. Dark hair, sun-browned skin, Apache cheekbones. "Dear God," he whispered. "You kept it." Silence crushed the room. Rowan felt years of careful lies beginning to crumble, but she lifted her chin, grounding herself in her son's hand. "This is my son, Jace Blake. His father was my husband, Diego Delgado." "Stop lying," Merrick flushed. "You were with savages. This thing is proof of what they did to you." "Mama?" Jace's voice trembled. "Why is the man angry?" Rowan knelt, blocking the world with her body. "Because he doesn't understand, mijo," she said gently. "Some people fear what they don't understand." She stood and faced Merrick with every scrap of dignity Ona had taught her. "Leave us alone. We have a life here. Your father deserves to know you're alive, that he has a grandson." "I have no father," Rowan said flatly. No family but my son. If you have any decency, you'll leave and forget you saw us. But she saw it in his eyes. He wouldn't. The story was too rich. The fallen woman, the Indian child. He would feast on it. When he left, promising he would return, the store remained silent. Then Estrella Vega, formidable in black silk, stepped forward. Sarah Delgado has been a good neighbor, she declared, a skilled healer, a devoted mother. I see no reason for that to change. Her gaze swept the room, heavy with authority. Do any of you? No one spoke. This village knew about borders and survival, about choosing one's own name. But Rowan understood the truth. Mercy had a limit. Merrick would return, possibly with Grady Blake, certainly with demands. That night, she sat with Jace beneath the stars, tracing constellations Tavok had once named for her. Are we going to run? Jace asked. Maybe, she admitted. Would that scare you? He thought hard. No. You said Father's people moved with the seasons. Maybe we're supposed to move too. She pulled him close. Maybe we are, little warrior. But first, there were preparations to make. If they ran, they would run toward something, not just away. This time her son would carry the truth openly. The next morning she began teaching him Apache in earnest. Not only words, but the stories that carried a people's heart. If they had to leave, they would carry their truth with them, a living flame no distance could extinguish. They did not run that day. When Merrick Crow returned 2 weeks later, with Grady Blake beside him, Rowan Blake met them at her door, with Jace standing at her side, and steel set firm in her spine. Time had not been kind to her father. Grady's hair had gone gray, his face carved deep with lines of worry and whiskey. When he saw her, something cracked in his weathered expression. Rowan, he whispered. My girl. Mr. Blake, she replied coolly, denying him the comfort of father. His eyes drifted to Jace, who stood straight and unflinching. Every inch his father's son. Rowan watched Grady take in the high cheekbones, the copper skin, the steady gaze that carried no shame. To his credit, Grady did not flinch. This is my grandson, he said quietly. This is my son, Rowan corrected. Jace Blake. His father was a good man who died protecting us. Merrick snorted. A good man? He was a savage. Choose your next words carefully, Rowan cut in, her hand sliding instinctively toward the knife hidden in her skirts. You stand at my door, in my village. Show respect or leave. Grady raised a hand, silencing Merrick. Rowan, please, come home. Whatever happened, we can... I am home, she said, gesturing to the small adobe house, the herb garden, the mountains rising behind it. I have work here. Purpose. My son has friends, school, a future. Living under a false name, Merrick muttered. Living free, Rowan corrected. Making our own way. The conversation that followed was painful, but necessary. Rowan did not bend. She would not return to Tucson. She would not raise Jace in a world that would see him only as evidence of shame. Grady pressed at first, then less so, perhaps remembering Inez Blake and how hard it had been for her to belong. At last, he sighed. At least let me help, he said, for the boy, his education. Rowan considered. Jace was brilliant. The village teacher said he outpaced students years older. Monthly deposits to the general store, she said finally. In the name of Sarah Delgado. No visits without invitation, no interference with our life here. Grady agreed, though it clearly cost him. Merrick left in a storm of disgust, making his judgment clear. Ruined, mad, raising an abomination. Rowan felt only relief as she watched him go. That door to her old life closed for good, and she did not mourn it. The years that followed required careful balance. Grady's money, heavy with guilt but useful, allowed Rowan to expand her healing work. She rented a small shop near the village center, part dispensary, part lending library. Jace helped after school, learning each plant, each tincture, each careful preparation. "Why do we help people, Mama?" he asked one day, grinding dried sage. "Because healing is sacred work," she answered. "Your father's people knew this. My mother's people knew this. We honor them by passing on what they taught us." She taught him everything: Apache knowledge from Ona, Mexican folk remedies from village women, European herbs from her mother's books. Jace absorbed it all, blending traditions with a mind that already reached beyond borders. By 10, he spoke 4 languages fluently: English, Spanish, Apache, and Latin, learned from Father Sylvan Reed, who recognized his gift. He could track deer through forest, prepare medicines that worked, and read everything from Virgil to Apache winter counts, Rowan recreated from memory. He was becoming what she had hoped, a bridge. But bridges must be strong. As Jace grew, so did the tests. Village boys sometimes taunted him for his mixed blood, calling him Indian with cruelty sharpened by fear. One afternoon, he came home with a split lip and scraped knuckles. "They say I don't belong anywhere," he said as she cleaned his wounds. "Not Mexican, not white, not really Apache." Rowan's chest tightened, remembering Tavok's words about belonging. "You belong to all, and none," she said carefully. "That's not weakness. It's strength. You can walk in any world because you carry all of them inside you." "Is that why we're different?" he asked. "Why you teach me things other mothers don't?" "Partly," she said, sitting beside him. "But mostly because the world is changing. Old boundaries are breaking. Whether people like it or not, you're not caught between worlds, mijo. You're building a new one." Jace considered this with the same gravity Tavok once had. "Like Father did when he chose you?" "Yes," Rowan said softly. "Exactly like that." As seasons turned, she watched her son grow into his inheritance. He carried Tavok's quiet leadership, drawing others to him. He had her stubborn resolve, but also something uniquely his own: the ability to see connections others missed, to blend traditions into something entirely new. When the village curandera grew too old to practice, she named Rowan her successor, unheard of for an outsider. But results spoke louder than tradition. Rowan's clinic became a meeting place for healing knowledge, where Apache women compared remedies with Mexican midwives, where ancient practices met new techniques Jace read about in medical journals from Santa Fe. They were creating something rare, something necessary, something that could not be erased. Estrella Vega said it one afternoon, watching Jace Blake explain blood circulation to a ring of wide-eyed children, shifting effortlessly between scientific language and old metaphors drawn from nature. "A new way of understanding," she murmured. Rowan Blake thought of Tavok's belief that survival came not from clinging to the past, but from carrying it forward in new forms. Perhaps this was how cultures endured, not by standing still, but by finding fresh vessels for ancient truth. The true test came when Jace was 15. A fever swept through the village, fast, ruthless, resistant to ordinary remedies. The valley doctor gave up. Father Sylvan Reed administered last rites. Children began to die. Rowan and Jace worked without sleep. They combined everything they knew: Apache purification rituals, Mexican herbal medicine, European medical practices Jace had studied late into the night. Together they created a treatment that should not have worked: willow bark tea prepared with Apache prayer, blended with a Mexican fever remedy, administered under strict hygiene Jace insisted upon. It worked. Not for everyone. Some were already beyond saving. But enough. The children who lived did so because a white woman, an Apache Mexican boy, and the knowledge of conquered peoples had woven something stronger than any single tradition. The valley sent a doctor to investigate. Dr. Thorne Kessler arrived young, curious, and unburdened by arrogance. He listened closely as Jace explained their method in precise medical terms, his questions sharp, his notes meticulous. "This is extraordinary," Kessler said. "You've created a new treatment protocol. This should be documented." "By whom?" Rowan asked dryly. "A woman with no formal training and her mixed-blood son?" Kessler flushed, but did not retreat. "By me, if necessary," he said firmly. "With full credit to the real authors, medicine needs this kind of innovation." That day marked the beginning of a partnership that would shape Jace's future. Kessler became a regular visitor, teaching formal anatomy and diagnosis in exchange for learning traditional remedies. Through his sponsorship, Jace enrolled in correspondence courses in medicine, his raw talent finally given structure. On his 17th birthday, Jace announced his decision. "I want to be a doctor," he said. "A real one. One who also knows the old ways." Rowan felt Tavok's presence as strongly as if he stood beside them. Their son was choosing the space between worlds, not as a burden, but as purpose. "It won't be easy," she warned. "Medical schools don't often welcome Indians," Jace finished with a smile, Tavok's fierce pride shining through. "Then I'll be the first. Or I'll find a place that cares more about skill than blood. Dr. Kessler says California has schools like that." She pulled him close. This young man taller than she was now, yet still her child. "Your father would be so proud." "Tell me about him," Jace asked, as he still sometimes did. "Tell me about the night he asked you to be his wife." So she told him, again, about choice and courage, about love that crossed forbidden lines, about freedom worth paying for in blood. The story had grown into legend over the years, shaped by memory and time. But its heart never changed. "I'll make them both proud," Jace said quietly. "Father, and the child who didn't live. I'll be the bridge they died trying to build." Rowan believed him. The boy born in a storm, raised in secrecy, had become exactly what she prayed for. Not Apache, not Mexican, not Anglo alone, but something new, something that honored all and belonged to none. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer frightening. Jace would leave soon for medical school, carrying knowledge no institution could teach. He would face prejudice, resistance, and doubt. But he would also carry the strength of Apache warriors, Mexican poets, frontier women, and indigenous healers. Rowan would remain, tending memory and medicine in her mountain village. She was no longer the frightened girl standing in the ashes of her father's ranch. She was Nadaya, keeper of words, guardian of stories that might otherwise vanish. Together, mother and son had built something from ruin. Not just survival, but transformation. Tavok had dreamed of preservation through adaptation. In their own way, they had made that dream real. The years passed like desert seasons, sometimes brutal, sometimes unexpectedly gentle. Always changing. From her clinic window, Rowan watched the village evolve. The railroad reached the valley below, bringing strangers, ideas, dangers. Old ways faded like long shadows at dusk. But in her corner of the world, they endured. Jace had been gone 4 years now, studying at the University of California. His letters arrived often, filled with new medical discoveries and barely restrained excitement. He wrote of professors who doubted him, then sought his counsel, of classmates who became friends once skill outweighed skin, and of a young woman named Nadia Santos, daughter of a Pueblo potter, training to be a nurse. Rowan folded the letters carefully, smiling. The bridge was holding. "She understands," Jace Blake wrote, "about carrying more than one world inside, about being a bridge." Rowan Blake smiled as she folded the letter, recognizing the careful restraint of young love in his words. Time, she had learned, was not a straight line, but a circle, and her son was finding his own way to connect across boundaries she had once crossed in blood and fire. The clinic had grown. Jace's success opened doors Rowan never could have forced alone. Young people of mixed heritage came seeking guidance. She taught them what she could, not only healing, but how to walk between worlds with dignity, patience, and spine. Some left for schools, armed with letters of recommendation from Dr. Thorne Kessler. Others stayed, learning the old ways before they vanished completely. All carried something forward. It was a warm autumn afternoon when Grady Blake came to her door for the last time. She had not seen him in 5 years, honoring their agreement, yet illness had carved him so deeply she would have known him anywhere. "I'm dying," he said simply. "Consumption. Weeks, maybe days." Rowan led him inside. One look was enough. Her healer's eye confirmed the truth. Disease had hollowed him out, leaving only regret and stubborn will. "Why come here?" she asked quietly. "To say what should have been said long ago," he coughed, blood spotting his handkerchief. "To tell you I was wrong. About your mother. About you. About everything." She prepared a tea to ease his breathing, the motions of care rising stronger than old wounds. As he drank, he spoke, of the years after she vanished, of slow understanding, of pride he felt watching Jace's achievements from afar, of respect for the choice she had made. "Your mother tried to tell me," he whispered, "that there were different ways to live, different ways to love. I was too afraid to listen." "Fear makes fools of us all," Rowan said, thinking of her own long road from terror to freedom. Grady stayed 3 days. Not reconciliation, something quieter. Acknowledgement. He told her stories of Inez Blake she had never known, a woman who fought for her right to be different in a world that demanded obedience. Rowan told him of Tavok, of the Apache way of seeing land and life, of how love could grow even in violence and loss. On the final night, breath rasping thin, he asked, "Will you forgive me?" "I forgave you long ago," Rowan answered honestly. "Hatred is too heavy to carry." He died at dawn. Rowan buried him in the village cemetery. Words were spoken in 4 languages: English for who he had been, Spanish for where he died, Apache for understanding that came too late, and Latin for the shared human truth of failing and redemption. Jace came home for the funeral, bringing Nadia Santos. She was everything Rowan had hoped for. Intelligent, grounded, rooted in her heritage, yet open to others. Watching them together, Rowan saw the future forming without fear. "We want to come back here after graduation," Jace told her. "Build a real hospital, one that serves everyone, white, Mexican, Apache, one that honors all traditions." "The Old Town doctor won't like competition," Rowan warned, though her heart lifted. "Then he'll have to adapt," Nadia said calmly. "The world is changing. Medicine has to change with it." They married the following spring in a ceremony that scandalized and delighted in equal measure. Apache blessings braided with Catholic vows. Pueblo pottery held Mexican flowers. Dr. Thorne Kessler stood witness beside Estrella Vega. After long deliberation, Father Sylvan Reed agreed to officiate, declaring that God surely smiled on love that built bridges. Their first child arrived with winter snow, a daughter they named Elowyn Blake Santos, carrying all their histories within her name. Rowan held her granddaughter and wept for those who were absent. Tavok, who died protecting a future he would never see. Ona, who taught strength through endurance. Her own mother, who planted rebellion in poetry and dreams. The hospital Jace and Nadia built became a model. Doctors and officials traveled to observe its integrated approach. Traditional healers worked beside trained nurses. Apache purification rituals took place in rooms equipped with modern surgical tools. It should not have worked. But it did, because it was built on respect. Rowan moved her clinic into the hospital at last, practicing openly what she had once done in secrecy. At 60, her hair silver, her hands still steady, she taught a new generation the synthesis born of necessity and love. When government officials arrived demanding indigenous children be sent to boarding schools, stripped of language and memory, Dr. Jace Blake stood against them, with law, influence, and relentless paperwork. When that failed, Rowan's old networks quietly helped families disappear into the mountains, until the officials retreated. "You can't stop progress," one agent snapped. "Whose progress?" Jace asked calmly. "My mother preserved knowledge that saves lives. My wife creates art museums beg for. Our daughter speaks 5 languages and can set a bone or solve equations with equal skill. That," he said, unwavering, "is progress." And the bridge held. Your way offers only a ratio. Beyond the valley, the world convulsed with change. Wars ignited and burned out. Territories hardened into states. The frontier, so the newspapers declared, closed its last gate. Yet in their mountain village, something else opened. Possibility. Plurality. The radical understanding that strength did not come from purity, but from mixture. Rowan Blake's journals from those years, found much later, revealed her private reckoning. Today marks 35 years since Tavok asked me to ride with him. I was 20 then, certain of nothing except that the life chosen for me was a slow death. I could never have imagined this. A granddaughter studying biology while humming Apache lullabies, a son who heals with both surgeon steel and sacred herbs, a community where difference is strength, not shame. The losses remain. My first child, my husband. His people scattered, broken. But from destruction came not replacement, transformation. The Apache way survives not in reservation museums, but in living hands. Tavok's dream of preservation through adaptation breathes in every patient we heal, every child who learns the truth of their history, every young soul who refuses to choose between worlds. I am old now. My body wears down like a trusted tool. But I am not afraid. I kept my promises. The stories live. The knowledge endures. The bridge holds. As if her body had only been waiting for permission, Rowan's health declined swiftly after her 70th birthday. She met it with the same practical courage that had defined her life. Teaching until her hands shook too much to demonstrate, speaking until her voice thinned to a whisper, writing until the pen slipped from her fingers. The end came on the night of the new moon, the same moon under which she had married Tavok. Jace Blake and Nadia Santos were there. So was Elowen Blake Santos, with her younger siblings close by. The room filled with the scent of desert sage and pine, Apache songs braided with Spanish prayers. "Tell them," Rowan whispered to Jace, "all of it. The truth. Not the comfortable story. Tell them about choice and consequence, about love that costs everything and gives more." Her voice faded, but her eyes burned with purpose. "I'll tell them," Jace promised. "Every word, every story, every truth." Rowan smiled then, the rare, full smile that transformed her weathered face in her final moments. She spoke softly in Apache. For Tavok, for Ona, for the child who never breathed, for all the ghosts who had walked beside her. Her last word was Tisna, complete. They buried her as she had instructed, not in the town cemetery, but in the old way, where eagles circled and wind sang through ancient stone. Jace spoke prayers in every language she had taught him, while Elowyn played a song on the Apache flute her grandmother had carved for her. The stone bore only these words: Rowan Blake, Nadiah Keeper of Words, Builder of Bridges. But stone was never her true monument. Her monument was the hospital that treated all with equal dignity, the young people who walked proudly between worlds, the knowledge preserved, passed hand to hand, heart to heart. The radical truth that love could triumph over division, that choice could overcome circumstance, that from the ashes of one world another could rise. In the end, she had kept every promise. The stars still carried their Apache names, the plants still whispered their healing secrets, and somewhere in the space between worlds, a love born of violence and silence endured, changed, but unbroken. The bridge held, the stories lived. The circle, at last, was complete. 50 years after Rowan Blake's burial, Elowyn Blake Santos, now a physician, stood before a packed auditorium at the University of New Mexico. Her hair, streaked with silver like her grandmother's, was pulled back in a practical knot. In her hands, she held a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with time. "My grandmother," she began, "was called many things: captive, survivor, healer, traitor." She looked out at the audience, academics, students, members of tribal nations, descendants of frontier families, listening with the intensity of those hungry for truths long buried. "But she called herself only one thing," Elowyn said steadily, "a woman who chose." And the room held its breath. Elowyn Blake Santos had fought for years to reach this moment, to bring her grandmother's journals into the open, to tear apart the comfortable myths of the Old West. For decades, Rowan Blake's life had been forced into shapes others found acceptable. The rescued white woman, the broken captive, the silent victim of savage hands. Even those who meant well insisted on seeing her as damaged, defined by trauma rather than choice. But her own words told another truth. Elowyn opened the journal, her fingers steady despite the weight of history, and began to read from Rowan's careful, slanted script. "They still ask me if I was forced, if I was taken against my will. They cannot imagine that I looked at the man they called savage and saw deliverance, that I looked at the life they called civilized and saw a cage. When Tavok, my husband, my love, my equal, asked me to ride with him, he offered what my own world never did, the freedom to choose who I would become." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Even in 1941, such words struck at deeply rooted beliefs about race, about women, about who was allowed to choose and who was meant to obey. "These journals," Elowyn continued, "along with my father Jace Blake's medical notes and the oral histories we've gathered, reveal a frontier far removed from Hollywood's fantasy. A place where borders blurred, where love crossed forbidden lines, where survival depended not on dominance, but on synthesis." She spoke of the hospital still operating in the mountains, where traditional healing stood beside modern medicine, of networks of families across the Southwest preserving Apache, Pueblo, and Mexican traditions, not in museums, but in kitchens, gardens, and clinics, of children and grandchildren of mixed heritage who had become doctors, teachers, artists, and leaders. "But this is not only a story of triumph," Elowyn warned, "it is also a story of loss." She spoke of Tavok's people, hundreds reduced to fewer than 20 survivors, of languages silenced, ceremonies outlawed, ways of life dismantled piece by piece. "My grandmother saved what she could," she said quietly. "She knew it was only fragments of a shattered whole." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Newspapers seized the story. Some praised it as proof that love could overcome hatred. Others denounced it as glorifying race mixing. Academics questioned the journal's authenticity. Debates raged over memory, narrative, and who had the right to tell whose story. But elsewhere, different conversations unfolded. In mountain towns of New Mexico, in villages across Arizona, in barrios and reservations alike, families began opening drawers long kept shut. Great-grandmothers listed as Mexican who still whispered Apache prayers. Great-grandfathers with pale eyes and fluent Navajo. Children raised between worlds at a time when such lives were illegal, or worse. A young anthropologist, Nadia Santos Delgado, of Yaqui descent, came to study the Blake Santos archives. "Your grandmother gave us permission to exist," she told Elowin, "to be complex, to refuse the boxes meant to hold us. Publishing the journals proved a battle of its own. Some publishers feared obscenity laws, not because of sex, but because of the radical truth that a white woman had freely chosen an Apache man and bore his children without shame. Some tribal leaders questioned a white woman's place in preserving Apache traditions. Conservative groups condemned the work outright. But Elowin persisted. Unexpected allies emerged. Black scholars at Howard University recognized parallels to their own erased histories. Jewish immigrant families understood survival through adaptation. Mexican-American activists claimed Rowan Blake as one of their own, a woman who built identity through choice, not inheritance. The first edition sold out in weeks. Attempts to ban the book only fueled demand. Letters arrived from across the country. From an Oklahoma teacher. "My grandmother was Creek, my grandfather German. Their marriage was illegal. Their children listed as illegitimate. Reading Rowan's words, I finally understand their courage." From a California veteran, "I served beside Apache scouts in the Great War. They saved my life. This book restores the honor history tried to erase." From a Texas housewife, "I was raised to fear Indians. This story made me question everything. How many truths have we buried?" Perhaps the most powerful response came from the Apache themselves. Thomas Kinzuma, a historian from San Carlos, wrote, "Rowan Blake was not Apache. She never could be. But she became something equally vital, a witness who refused to let our stories disappear. When our own children were taken and forbidden their language, she preserved what she could. It was not perfect, it was never complete. But in an age of cultural erasure, even imperfect preservation was resistance." Hollywood came next, as it always did. They wanted a film, Captive Heart, Desert Rose, something marketable and false. Elowin knew the ending before it was written. Tavok reduced to a noble savage. Rowan turned helpless, the truth buried beneath spectacle. She refused them all. Instead, she joined Nadia Santos Delgado and a collective of indigenous filmmakers to create a documentary series, one that refused simplification, refused comfort, refused lies. Because some stories were not meant to be consumed. They were meant to endure. They interviewed elders who still remembered Rowan Blake, filming among the whitewashed walls of the hospital that continued to breathe and work as it always had. They traced the scattered bloodlines of Tavok's band through descendants spread across the Southwest, names changed, stories half buried, but not erased. The most powerful moment came when they found Robert K. Wynn, grandson of a woman killed during the massacre. He sat before the camera holding a fragment of beadwork. Unfinished, darkened with old blood, its pattern frozen mid-gesture. His grandmother had been making it for Rowan's unborn child. It had passed through generations, not as a relic, but as a responsibility. "My family hated white people for what was done," he said quietly. but my great-aunt survived. She told us about the white woman who chose to be one of us, who carried our chief's child, who kept our medicines alive when practicing them meant prison or worse. He looked down at the beads. Hatred is too heavy to carry forever. Maybe it's time we honor the bridges as well as mourn the burned ground. The series won awards. It stirred arguments. It unsettled certainty. But more importantly, it loosened tongues and opened doors. Across the country, people began sharing histories they had been taught to hide. Stories too complex for textbooks, too uncomfortable for myths. A quiet movement grew. Not to romanticize the past or excuse its brutality, but to complicate it. To restore agency to those written only as victims. To honor survival not as purity, but as synthesis. Elowin founded the Rowan Blake Tavok Foundation, using the book's proceeds to fund scholarships for indigenous medical students, to support traditional healers, and to document knowledge at risk of vanishing. The hospital in New Mexico became a place people traveled to, not seeking miracles, but understanding. Proof that healing could honor every tradition without being trapped by any. In her later years, Elowin often sat in her grandmother's garden, now folded into the hospital grounds. The same herbs still grew there: Apache tea, Mexican marigold, European chamomile, thriving side by side in the high desert soil. Medical students would find her there, eager to hear first-hand accounts of the woman who chose love over safety, truth over comfort. She wasn't a saint, Elowin always told them. She was difficult, stubborn, sometimes wrong. She couldn't save Tavok, or their first child, or an entire way of life. She paused, then added, "She preserved some things. She appropriated others. She was shaped by her time even as she fought it, but in a world that offered women almost no choices. She chose." The final entry in Rowan's journal, which Elowin read to close every lecture, seemed to speak across generations. "I am asked whether I regret the path I chose. How can I regret the love that made me whole? The children who carried forward what others sought to destroy. The knowledge preserved, the lives healed, the bridges built." Yes, there was pain. Pain beyond anything I imagined in my safe white world. Yes, there was loss. My husband, my child, a way of life as beautiful as it was doomed. But there was also purpose, joy, connection across every boundary I was told was sacred. I was Rowan Blake, a daughter shaped by expectation. I became Nada, keeper of words. I was both. I was neither. I was myself, finally and fully. "They say I was captured," the journal continued. "They are right. Captured by love, by choice, by the terrible, beautiful freedom of stepping outside the story written for me. I wish such capture for every soul brave enough to choose their own becoming. The men who killed my husband believed they were ending a story. They were wrong. They were beginning it. Every proud mixed-blood child, every medicine remembered, every boundary crossed in love rather than conquest. These are Tavok's victories, his survival, his answer to those who tried to make the world smaller. I go to my grave unrepentant. Let this be my epitaph." She chose. As the 20th century moved forward, Rowan Blake's story took its place within the tangled fabric of American history. No longer hidden, no longer simplified, no longer safe. It stood as proof of the power of individual choice within systems designed to erase choice. Of love persisting amid landscapes of hatred. Of bridges built even as others burned them. In universities and reservation schools, in barrio clinics and quiet living rooms, her words continued to echo. Not as conquest, but connection. Not purity, but synthesis. The frontier, it turned out, had never truly closed. It had only moved inward, into the contested territory of the human heart, where each generation must choose again between fear and freedom. Rowan Blake made her choice in 1882, standing in the ashes of her father's ranch. The ripples of that choice spread far beyond anything she could have imagined. The bridge held, the stories lived, and the circle, at last, was unbroken. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment. And thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.